Good morning, friends. Welcome to Dream Big Today. My name is Debbie, and this is Monday, July the 28th. I would like to start this morning with my devotional from Jesus Listens. It's a good one to kick off Monday with. It says, Compassionate Jesus, I come to you feeling weak and weary, seeking to rest in your refreshing presence. I know that you are always by my side, but sometimes I'm forgetful of your nearness. I confess that I'm easily distracted by the expectations of other people. If their demands are too numerous and weighty, eventually I feel like I'm carrying a crushing load. Have you ever felt that way? You are looking at the expectations of people rather than the plans that God has for you. And you know what? His is so much easier than the expectations of others. I'm going to jump on down to the bottom part of this devotion. Lord, I open my heart to your healing, holy presence. I lift up my hands to in joyful adoration, eager for your abundance to flow freely into me. I desire you above all else, for my soul finds rest in you alone. I'm grateful that you give strength to your people and bless your people with peace. Are you grateful today? Do you have you thought about all of the blessings that God has given you, and have you spoke to him about that today? Good morning, Nancy, Ann, Mary. Glad to have y'all on here with me. I saw Nancy's daughter the other day. She's my hairdresser, so I got a haircut from my friend. So that was awesome. And Sherry. So see, we've got sisters on here today. I think that's always awesome. So, if you would put your prayer request and your praise report in the chat box so we can pray with you, we can celebrate with you. And I have a praise report this morning. I mentioned here a while back that I've been doing prison ministry with our church, and we had a young lady come to church last Sunday and this Sunday that we had visited with in prison. It was absolutely amazing. And I didn't know if I would recognize her or any of them if I see them in a crowd, because that's always different. But when I saw her yesterday, it was just like she was glowing, and I got to hug her and just chat with her a little bit. It was the best thing ever. So we continue doing this, and this is why we do what we do, so we can uh, meet people and invite them to church and let them come worship with us instead of the life that they had lived. Let's change that and just be with other like believers and worshiping. It was wonderful. So now then, we're in Second Chronicles, and let's see. Let me just give you our scripture reference. Second Chronicles 21 through 23. And so we continue talking about the reign of the kings, and obviously that's what this is all about. But you know what? Today I'm going to be focusing on the impact of a couple of women in this. Sometimes we feel like that maybe we don't have a lot of impact. Maybe what we do or don't do doesn't make a difference, but we'll see today what a difference it does make, and I will show you that. I also wanted just to mention for Chronicles, this is the writer's purpose in this was to reunite the nation around the true worship of God after that captivity. In these pages, he reminds the people of their past. He clearly broadcasts his message through one of the best known scriptures, which we've read, that was If my people who are called by my name humble themselves to pray and seek my face and turn, completely change, quit doing the same thing you've been doing and turn and come to church, come worship, then I will hear you from heaven, will forgive their sin and heal their land. So as we read through the we're nearing the last chapters in Chronicles, listen to God's voice in this, obey him and receive redemption, his healing touch. So let me switch. I got all my Bibles on my desk again. So Jehoshaphat has died and he was buried, and his son Jehoram became the next king. Jehoram, before I go any farther, let me read Proverbs 20 verse 7 in today's reading. The godly walk with integrity. Blessed are their children who follow them. Now, Solomon wasn't there to advise them. He had written that. So here we go. We've got Jehoshaphat has passed on, and here's Jehoram. So it names his brothers. Their father had given each of them valuable gifts of silver, gold, costly items, and some of the fortified towns. However, he designated Jehoram as the next king because he was the oldest. Oh, well, so what happened then? Like his next step is let's just get rid of everybody. As soon as he became established, it says in verse 4, he killed all of his brothers and some of the other leaders of Judah. What a way to begin your kingdom. He was 32 years old. This would be about 848 BC when he became king, and he reigned for just 8 years. So we can wrap him up just pretty quick as we get started in this. And then we have an example of a toxic marriage. He followed the example of the kings and was as wicked as King Ahab, for he had married one of Ahab's daughters. So Jehoram did what was evil in the Lord's sight. So Jehoram's wife was Athaliah, there we go, famous for her impieties and cruelty like her mother. So here's Jehoram's wife with a picture of evil. Her mother was evil. It was all down through the family. As reading Proverbs 20 verse 7, the godly walk with integrity, and blessed are their children. So likewise, if the children are seeing the ungodly, the evilness, that do what you want to anytime you want and with no regard to anybody else, then do you know right from wrong? God's given us a desire, a knowingness that we know that we're not supposed to kill. We know that we're not supposed to hurt somebody's feelings. We know the nature of how we feel when somebody does something to us, and not to do that to somebody else. But verse 7, but the Lord did not want to destroy David's dynasty, for he had made a covenant with David and promised that his descendants would continue to rule, shining like a lamp forever. This is the line of Jesus. But there's people that are evil in that line. What we know is God keeps his promises, regardless of what we we think about the day, oh my goodness, this is happening. I thought that if I read my Bible and prayed that everything good would happen to me. Well, here's the deal. Sin is real. And the enemy is attacking us all the time, and he can get us distracted and confused, and if we're not paying attention, if we're not reading our Bible, we will go down the wrong path, as all of these people did. That it could have been so different had they obeyed and followed God. God keeps his promises. Now it says shining like a lamp forever. The lamp was more than a symbol of life and of testimony. It reminded the hearer of the covenant. So during Jehoram's reign, the Edomites revolted against Judah and crowned their own king. So Jehoram went out with his full army and all of his chariots. The Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, but he went out at night and attacked them under the cover of darkness. Even so, Edom has been independent from Judah to this day. The town of Libnah also revolted about the same time. All this happened because Jehoram had abandoned the Lord of his ancestors, or the Lord. Oh my goodness. He had abandoned the Lord, the God of his ancestors. He built pagan shrines and led the people of Jerusalem and Judah to give themselves to pagan gods and go astray. So here's the leadership. When we are, and we all are in a place of leadership, there's somebody watching you. There's somebody wanting to follow the example that you lead. But those who fail to lead rightly will suffer the consequences greatly. Elijah comes along, and he has a letter of rebuke to Jehoram. This is what the Lord, the God of your ancestor David, look how he put that out there. Jehoram knew of Grandpa David, Father David, and knew of everything that he had done. He knew about Solomon. He knew about all of this stuff. So now it says you have not followed the good example of your father Jehoshaphat, of your grandfather King Asa. Instead, you have been evil as the kings of Israel. You have led the people of Jerusalem and Judah to worship idols, and you've killed your own brothers, men who were better than you. Now the Lord is about to strike you, your people, your children, your wives, and all that is yours with a heavy blow. You yourself will suffer with a severe intestinal disease that will get worse each day until your bowels come out. Now, that sounds like a very specific thing that Elijah prophesied over him, warned over him, let him know this is going to happen if you keep doing what you're doing. But he was a bad leader. He was a selfish leader. He was self-focused and jealous of others' success. So we wrap this up just pretty quick, because it says then that after everything, the Lord struck Jehoram with an incurable intestinal disease. And I hope you've had breakfast already, but this disease grew worse and worse until the end of 2 years. He has suffered unbelievably, and he died in agony. His people did not build a great funeral fire to honor him as they had done for the ancestors. So he was 32 when he became king. He reigned 8 years, and no one was sorry when he died. They buried him in the city of David, but not in the royal cemetery. How would that be? He was hated when he lived, and he was rejected when he died. I mean, like they were thinking, man, this is the best day ever. You don't expect to hear that at a funeral. So then verse or chapter 22 continues on. The people made Ahaziah, Jehoram's youngest son, their next king, and he was 22. Now there's a asterisk there by it that he may be 42. Anyway, that's not significant. And his mother was Athaliah, granddaughter of the king. Now Ahaziah also followed the evil example of King Ahab's family, for his mother encouraged him in doing wrong. We see the the effects of the family whenever the grandparents aren't walking in the light. Now, we can walk in the light and still there can be somebody jump on their own path and try something different, but that's why we are praying peoples to bring our family back. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, then even became his advisors after death of his father. They led him to ruin. So it goes on. He dies, and grandma, no, it's his mother, learned her son was dead, and she began to destroy the rest of the family. So Athaliah was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. She was a bad influence on everybody. But in the midst of this story, we've gone from a evil woman to a brave, courageous woman, and that's Jehoshaphat. Ahaziah's sister Jehoshaphat, the daughter of King Jehoram, took Ahaziah's infant son Joash and stole him away from among the rest of the king's children who were about to be killed. How did this woman become like this when all of the rest of the family that she was in the midst of were evil? She's seen all of this. She put Joash and his nurse in a bedroom. In this way, Jehoshaphat, wife of Jehoiada, the priest and sister of Ahaziah, hid the child so Athaliah could not murder him. So Athaliah has gained the distinction of being the only woman in history to gain the throne of David. But here is a woman that also gained a distinction of being strong and courageous, and you should highlight her name. This act placed her in this Bible for her story to be told for generations. She is of this bloodline. She stood up. God's planted somebody in your life, in your family's life, on down through generations to just keep that line going that he wants going. So one of my notes says, no evil anger is sufficient to frustrate the divine purpose, and against the wickedness of one woman, God set the compassion of the other. I just find that amazing. I love reading stories like that. I love thinking, how does that apply to me today? Can I stand up to the evil and wicked that's going on in the world at this moment and let somebody know with love that that's not right? Can I stand in that room in the prison to talk about right from wrong? Yes, I can. So I can stand out anywhere and invite somebody to church. Come to church with me. You can sit by me. Let's hear about the Word of God that will explain in itself right from wrong. But sometimes somebody needs somebody to sit by to do that. So then I want to jump over to chapter 23. It says, in the 7th year of Athaliah's reign, Jehoiada, priest, decided to act. He summoned his courage. He summoned his courage. Now, his wife has already summoned her courage. Jehoiada risked his life to do the right thing, just like Jehoshaphat also did. So he's ready to king, to bring the son, to show he is the king's son, and it's time for him to be king. So verse 3 says, they all gathered at the temple of God, where they made a solemn pact with Joash, the young king. Jehoiada said to them, here is the king's son. Time has come for him to reign. The Lord has promised that a descendant of David will be our king. I believe he stood on that promise. The time was right, and he knew what the word said. He's a priest, so he's been studying, he's been sharing, and probably been really frustrated with what he's seen. But maybe when his wife took that infant son and hid it, maybe that was a trigger for him to say, now's the time. He's seen the mother of the king destroy everybody. So just as it is today, God's promises are true. They're real, and they stand forever. Let's jump on over towards the end of this chapter. Athaliah is not happy. She's screaming treason, treason whenever she hears that there's another grandson that exists that she didn't get to kill. But they seized her and led her out of the entrance of the horse gate on the palace grounds, and they killed her there. See, they couldn't kill her in the temple. They executed her outside. And then verse 16 says, then Jehoiada made a covenant between himself and the king and the people, that they would be the Lord's people. And all of the people went over to the temple of Baal and tore it down. This moment in time that was the right place, the right plan, and the right people jumped in together, moved forward, brave and courageously, knowing that God is directing all of these things. And it all went. And it looked at verse 21. The people of the land rejoiced, and the city was peaceful because Athaliah had been killed. Now, her mother, Jezebel, was also killed. So her life ended just like her mom's, by execution. Let's jump into Romans 11:13 through 36 this morning. This is another good one, and I've got my New Living Translation out, and I'm also going to use my let me see what I've got, because I got another different one. New American Standard. It's got some wording in there that I like a little better for some parts of it. Romans 11:13. Now, before I read that, I want to back up to Acts 9:5. And this was the conversion of Paul. And it says, probably ought to get my Bible up here a little closer so I can see it. Well, let me back up to 4. And he fell to the ground. This was a conversion of Paul. He heard a voice saying, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, Who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Get up and enter the city, and it will be told what you must do. And so, in that story, in Acts 9, the conversion of Paul is when he was commissioned and sent. So now we are in verse 13. Paul was appointed as a missionary to the Gentiles. God has appointed me as apostle or Gentile, but apostle is one sent by another. And so God has sent him to share the gospel. I stress this, for I want somehow to make the people of Israel jealous of what you Gentiles have, so that I might save some of them. Paul understood the sovereignty of God in salvation. He understood that whom God foreknew, he predestined and called, as we read in Romans 8:28 through 30. And yet, here we see he approaches this issue of salvation with a sense of his responsibility of delivering the gospel to all men, for he doesn't know who the elect are. So he is sharing it with everybody. So in verse 15, for if their rejection is the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? I'm going to get on over to 16. And since Abraham and the other patriarchs were holy, their descendants will also be holy, just as the entire batch of dough is holy, because a portion given as an offering is holy. For the roots of the tree are holy, and the branches will be too. So this first piece is like the first fruits. The first part of the dough was offered up to God as a symbol of the entire lump, and it belonged to him. So first fruits, as the patriarchs at Abraham, might be called the original core group of Christians who were each Jewish. But some of these branches from Abraham's tree, some of the people of Israel, have been broken off, and you Gentiles who were branches from a wild olive tree have been grafted in. So now you also receive the blessing God has promised Abraham and his children, sharing in the rich nourishment from the root of God's special olive tree. This is also good. I have two little papers just full of notes here, if I can figure out which one I need to talk about first. Now, the wild olive tree. When an old olive tree had lost its vigor, one remedy was to cut out the failing branches and graft in some wild shoots. This resulted in an invigoration of the failing tree. So the root, the olive tree represents the kingdom. Jesus is the root. The branches are the people of the kingdom. God expects his people to be holy. So it's only through this gospel that we can become inhabitants or the branches of it. Then 18, you must not brag about being grafted in to replace the branches that were broken off. You are just a branch, not a root. See, they probably decided that, oh man, look at me. I'm holier than thou. But boasting on this conduct is critical toward God and the work that He is doing. It goes on to talk about the application of God's purpose in Israel's rejection, that the Gentiles might be reached, because there's a lot of ifs. If you continue to do this, if you stop, if you circle the ifs and see what that's telling you today. I want to jump on down to verse 28. Many of the people of Israel are now enemies of the good news, and this benefits you Gentiles. Yet they are still the people He loves because He chose their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Then verse 29, God's gifts and His call can never be withdrawn. Now, as I read that, I thought, oh my goodness, and look what we've been reading in Chronicles about all of the wicked kings. Well, there's that thread that goes through the whole Bible of Jesus. We start in the beginning when He was in the creation, and then the whole line here, Jesus or God promised and made a covenant with David that his descendants would continue to rule, which that for that time was the people, but now we know that means Jesus in the end. And so that promise was made. We have promises. These promises are for us also. For God has imprisoned everyone in disobedience so He could have mercy on everyone. God offers mercy to these prisoners based on the person and the work of Jesus. Verse 36, for everything comes from Him and exists by His power and is intended for His glory. All glory to Him forever. Highlight that whole verse. Paul is attributing everything concerning creation, redemption, providence, and eternity to God. And we can meditate on that today and not think highly of ourselves because we're all that in a bag of chips because we've got 50 Bibles in our house. Let's read them and do what they say. You have a great morning, and come back today at noon, and we're going to